And it's Thursday, 9:05. I'm punctual like always. Like I said a couple weeks ago, Derek's not here. We just don't care about time, and Dave and I get chatting, or John goes and screws up, or whatever causes it. John screwing up. But how are we doing this evening, Dave? Just you and I again. Hopefully we can make a sensible show out of this.
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's getting more and more autumnal out there. It's crunchy leaves and bright colors and etc. So it's a nice time to be outside. And of course, I'm constantly sweeping leaves out of my garage this time of year too. I can't have the garage door open because it just fills up.
I haven't quite noticed that yet. I've done a lot of driving this week. Surprise, surprise. And no fall colors or anything. And I've really stuck to two lane highways and staying off the interstate. And that I enjoy it so much more. It's so much less pressure. It's stressful driving on the interstate anymore. I just don't like doing it.
So if I can be with you.
You drive a 1963 car on the road, and no, I'm still driving something modernish, but it's just, I don't like driving 90 miles an hour everywhere anymore. And it's a whole topic for a whole nother show. And
yeah, driving to drive versus driving for transportation.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I was listening to something today and they were talking about, while this has changed and this has changed, nothing has changed. I want to pick up the book the guy was talking about in that, but nothing's changed. I mean, traffic deaths, even though cars are safer and everything, traffic deaths remain constant. I mean, it's always going to be 30 to 40,000 people a year. And it just doesn't seem to change. Granted, we have more drivers and we drive more miles, etc. But still, I believe in this. What do I want to say? This line of BS they've taught me over the years that we're going to have safe cars and safer to drive.
Well, I mean, and I suppose if you say 30 to 40,000 is constant against an ever increasing population, then it's actually a decrease in overall deaths as a whole. On the other side, if we're gonna do away with vehicle safety, then I'm going to propose we just put a sharpened steel spike at the center of every steering wheel. Traffic deaths will spike, no pun intended, and then dramatically decrease as everyone comes to respect what a death machine we're all piloting on a regular basis.
That's exactly, people just don't comprehend. And even Disapproving Cat pops in with, yes, we have way more drivers. And deaths per 1,000 drivers might be down, but us, we won't get into the whole cell phone thing and that, but it should be getting safer and safer. But once we all get into the Elon Musk iRobot world, which if you saw his presentation of his robo bus and his robo car or pod and that from earlier in the week, and then the following day, the guy who created, or one of the producers of iRobot, said, now, Elon, are you going to pay me for my designs? Because compare the two, they're the exact same thing. The bus looks just like the bus in iRobot. The car looks just like the modified Audi R8 from iRobot and that. So it's another Elon making news again, talking about him, good or bad. And that's kind of.
Oh, I was just going to say. I mean, that's what he's good at is getting his name out there, whether it's for good things or not. And
ironically, Tesla. What do I want to say? Profits were up for Q3. Everybody hates Elon, but they keep buying his stuff.
I guess that's why they let him stay in charge. So yeah, Disapproving Cat talks about the the safety of, first of all, disapproving cat. There's no place you could have been going 80 miles an hour legally unless you were in like North Dakota. So I gotta chide you. That deer might still be alive if you've been doing the speed limit. But I'm well pleased you survived. And yeah, I mean, modern automobile design, and this plays into our topic tonight, is so safety focused that you can drive into a bridge abutment at 100 miles an hour, which my 62 Corvair, that would absolutely be a death sentence. And you could do that now. And whether it has made us less careful drivers is, I think it probably has. Just we have this sense of security, which is fine for us in the modern car, but not for the people around us who might be in older cars or pedestrians who don't have the advantages of upgraded safety features every year.
I'm sitting here thinking, hitting a deer 80 miles an hour, backwoods, you're bringing up 60s era cars. And for some reason, I was in the hotel room the other night doing some digital designing, and Tommy Boy was on. And of course, I remember the scene in there with like the 65 Coronet convertible where the deer comes back to life in the back seat of the.
Oh, yes.
You know, I'm not a big Tommy Boy fan, John Candy fan, etc. But it was funny, and it was one of those mindless things to have on in the background. So
I years ago, and it's all worn out now and gone, but I had a Callahan Auto Parts shirt, and I bought it because I was like, oh, Callahan Auto Parts, Sandusky, Ohio. I did not understand it was a Tommy Boy reference for a long time, and then somebody points at it in a line one day, and he goes, oh, I love that movie, and I'm like, what movie? What movie are you talking about? He's like, yeah, that's from Tommy Boy. That's the brake parts supplier they work at. And I'm like, oh, so now when I see it, I get it. But I'm like, every time somebody brings that movie up, I think of that car that gets utterly destroyed in the process of that movie, which reminded me of what happens to the K car in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
That's not a K car. That is a Dodge 400 convertible in that, I believe.
Isn't that a K car?
Well, it's based off of a K car, but it's not a K model.
Oh, well, to me, I mean, the minivans are practically K cars. It's all the same platform.
Yeah, the only thing Chrysler produced in the 80s that wasn't on the K car platform were the full-size trucks and full-size vans.
I learned to drive on a very late version. It was a Dodge Spirit. I don't know if that was a K or a K descendant, but very much the same styling.
No, it was I believe it was a K car derivative. My driver's ed car was actually a Plymouth Reliant K, I believe it was, because it was a Dodge Aries K and the Plymouth Reliant K. 86 model.
Yeah, but the wood-sided convertibles, the LeBarons and the Town and Countries, and
yeah,
the Maserati TC wasn't a woody, but it was that same boxy convertible.
Well,
they weren't bad-looking cars. They just
we had a Dodge 600 ES turbo convertible. Bring John's car passed into it, so we kind of basically had the car that was in the movie. We bought it instead of an 85 LeBaron convertible. And then my mom got an 87 LeBaron convertible, which is basically what the Chrysler Maserati TC was without a back seat. And a bit of trivia, I actually looked at a Facebook marketplace listing the other day for a Chrysler Maserati TC convertible with the extremely rare Maserati engine and 5-speed transmission.
Wow.
Located
if you
in
have
Birmingham.
If you have one of those and something breaks on it, can you actually go out and find the parts you need to replace it? Or are there a lot of these cars that are sitting around waiting for that one obtainium part to show back up on the market?
Well, if you buy the Chrysler Maserati TC with the Chrysler drivetrain, you're okay. Yes, you've got your unique body parts and that, but any of that stuff can be remade. If you buy the one with the Maserati drivetrain, you have the you have a car as dependable as the Maserati B-Turbo of the 80s with a lesser parts availability.
Lovely. And Chrysler build quality to boot.
Well, which is fabulous.
Right. My personal rule is, after having owned a few after this date, is that I won't consider another Chrysler product made after 1954, because I just have not had good experiences with the Mopars since then.
Well, the 55 500, or excuse me, the 55 300 and the 57 300C, and that weren't bad cars.
I mean, especially new, but the longevity of all of that is questionable. Actually, I really love the styling of the 55 Plymouth. Like, the fact that more 55 Plymouths weren't purchased to roll around amongst the 55 Fords and Chevys that have survived is unfortunate, because I think it's a really clean design, especially I forget it was middle ground car, like the Savoy or something, had a plain chrome strip down the side and was a sharp car. Most of the ones you see that have survived are the real high zoot Belvederes with the wacky tritone trim on them. But yeah, the certain iterations of that design were really nice. But I think the big issue with Chrysler build quality in the mid-50s was that they bought their body supplier, Briggs, and Briggs had a really good quality reputation. But unfortunately, they were going out of business by 1954. And so to keep them around, Chrysler bought them, couldn't run them any better, but in the process of trying to squeeze some more profitability out of it, or less loss, drained away the quality in the process. So you just didn't have the same body engineering on Chryslers after that point that you did before it, which is not to say that there weren't some decent Chrysler products in there. But just that they were less typical of the company than they had been up to that point.
It just sounds like they were about 60 years ahead of corporate America.
Well, when you were number 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 4 all that time, they had to pinch pennies. And then, of course, they went bankrupt anyway in 1979. So it didn't really work.
I thought they avoided bankruptcy with some multi-billion-dollar bailout. Didn't actually get bankruptcy till 2000.
By the skin of their teeth. They
borrow money they borrow money the old-fashioned way. They pay it back. That's what Lee Iacocca said in 82 or 83.
Right. Yeah. He could be an entire episode. And I'd want to bring notes, because I'm not really a fan, but everybody is such a fan. I'd need to, have my sources in a row.
Well, one thing I remember, and we'll get to the topic at hand and just about Lee Iacocca and getting into today's world, we get into all these arguments and corporate CEO income. And I distinctly remember Lee Iacocca on the cover of Time magazine, and everybody was touting and celebrating his world record $20 million a year salary in like 84 or 85, which he was making more money than any CEO at the time. Now, I don't even know if that's minimum wage for a CEO anymore. But yes, I understand. But it just different times, different worlds. And that's kind of where we're at with, when you've brought it up a couple of times here in this conversation, and I brought it up because it's very poignant, automotive styling. For those that have seen the video or see the podcast cover art, I went to Friendly Chat GT and I said, give me what do I want to say? An abstract combination of the present day supercars. And it gave me a drawing, and it was pretty cool. And then it gave me another one very similar to what's behind me on screen and what the podcast cover art is. I'll step away. But then I said, do it in a blue tint, because everything No Driving Gloves should be blue tint. And this is what I got. And we obviously, because of Dave and I are going to be completely different times on this topic came about because of the new Ferrari F80 that debuted this week, or the press releases and the videos are out. I don't know how many people have really actually seen and touched and licked the car. But, when I first saw it, oh yeah, there's some F40 to it because of that fender notch. It's got a very F40-esque front fender, not in the overall shape and curves, but it's got a very squared off rear lip and this big opening in front of the door. And then people, the taillights are nothing else is similar to the F40. Nothing else is similar to really anything Ferrari. And it just, I don't understand where we're going with hypercar design or even car design necessarily. You can't say it harkens back to the F40 or harkens back to whatever, because it doesn't. Just because it has one styling cue reminiscent of some other multi-million-dollar unobtainable car for the majority of the world, it doesn't scream that. And that drives me nuts. And then the other thing that drives me nuts with just about every other one of these hypercars, supercars, whatever you want to call it, is all this, what looks like a Honda did in 2005 when a J.C. Whitney catalog. You ordered every piece of carbon fiber that you could out of J.C. Whitney, and you glued it on your car. So you had all these wings and spoilers. And one of the cool things that I really like about the Ferrari 360, it had no arrow above, that was visible from the top. Yeah, the overall shape of the car a little bit, but there were no wings and canyards or spoilers and vents. And it was just a very, very clean car. And all the aero was handled on the under tray. And now because we've got to go 250, 300 miles an hour, we got to have all this little tack on stuff. And even the Bugatti.
What if you hit a deer at that speed?
The deer goes poof. And you probably continue on. Just be this red mist.
When I looked up the F50 after you brought it up this evening, I couldn't help but think how much it looked like a Can-Am car from the 80s with all of the
what it does.
Yeah, I mean, it was, which were like they took an Indy car of the time and like draped the whole thing with aero, trying to turn every bit of it into a downforce machine. And I mean, maybe that's necessary for safety at the speeds they're going. In which case, if all the supercars look the same, it's probably convergent evolution. There's only a certain number of shapes that are willing to go that speed with stability. And so you're like, well, we can put carbon fiber inserts at different locations to differentiate these from the others, but they're all kind of going to look the same. And I mean, this is probably why I tend to prefer cars that go a lot slower, is because you get more ability to differentiate what they look like for pure styling, because it's not uncompromised performance, which, it's like race cars. Race cars in a certain class all tend to look the same because they're all trying to accomplish exactly the same thing. And all of the engineering points at a certain solution at a certain time. And maybe we'll get lucky and some engineer who thinks dramatically outside the box will give us something truly fresh that doesn't look like an 80s Can-Am car, but can drive 275 miles an hour at Nürburgring and in safety. But then, of course, everybody's going to copy him in a few years. So it comes the full circle. But if it's any consolation, I mean, that's been the truth since the beginning. Like 1904, Mercedes introduces the long hood in the front with the engine up there. And suddenly everybody, even if their engine isn't up front, has to have a hood and even possibly a faux radiator, just because that's what people expect when they buy a high performance car. And there's probably some of that going on too. Like, all the trust fund bros that are buying these cars or whatever, they want it to look like a certain thing. And if they're my age or younger, which seemingly a lot of them are from the drivers I've witnessed, they probably grew up with Testarossas on the wall and want something that looks sort of like that, with the scoops and inlets, but updated to their sense of what 21st century engineering should give them. It also reminded me what you said about, one vestigial styling element doesn't make a whole callback design. And I thought about when they heavily restyled the Mustang in 95 and it had those side vents again. And the ads of the time promoted the hell out of like what a retro detail this was and how it tied it to the 65. And yet in a couple of years, they've got a true retro Mustang, and nobody talks about how that 95 was supposed to be a throwback design.
You're talking the SN 95 Mustang, and I remember that came out in 94, so it was a 30th anniversary celebration, and they touted that scoop in the side and but it was pre-retro, where we really went retro. And what always drove me, and they even talked about the 3 slits in the taillight, which on the 84 or 94, 95, maybe even the 96, or horizontal. And then somebody said, wait, we need to make those vertical. And so it never tied in. And I think when you're going to talk about tying styling to a car, the classic Mini to the whatever it was, R52 or whatever, the first new Mini in 2001.
I don't know the nomenclature, but great cars from what I've heard. Yeah.
It was bigger, but you knew it was a Mini. When the Ford did it with the Thunderbird, there were more than just one styling cue. When the 02 2-seat Bird came out, it worked. When the new Beetle came out, you knew it was a Beetle, even though they moved the engine and everything. I'm not a big fan of retro cars. Those worked. And then, of course, the HHR and the PT Cruiser from Chrysler, they weren't trying to be reminiscent, or even the PT Cruiser, really, to me, weren't trying to be reminiscent of a car. They were being reminiscent of an era. And I think they did it well. By the end of the PT Cruiser's life, it was a joke of a car, but I'm also very familiar with the first weeks of the PT Cruiser being on the market and people chasing transporters down, trying to buy these cars, and the wait lists and John's story. The reason I'm familiar with that is my stepfather saw a transporter with 6 of them on it and followed it to the dealership. And one of those was not sold. And that's the one he went home with. And, he tweaked it up and a couple little things, exhaust and a couple little styling cues. And they drove it for, years. And I can't remember what it ended up being traded for, but it was a fun car. They drove it to my graduation from McPherson College, and everybody at the college was going crazy because I think, that was in May and the cars came out in like April. It was kind of like the Mustang or whatever in 64. So you can do it, but if you look at the cover or the podcast cover art for this episode, styling trends and this ChatGPT design car behind me, it easily could be the new Aston Martin, the new Porsche supercar, the new Ferrari supercar, the new, Pagani, whatever. That's all they do is it's like, we want to go this fast, ChatGPT, ask AI, and this is what the car has to look like, and this is what the car has to do. And all it's doing is learning from everything that was put into the internet prior to it. So it's taking all these little cues, and guess what? We joked in the 80s and 90s, well, really more in the 90s, all cars look like an egg. They all look the same. Taurus had the Ford had the Taurus with no sharp angles on it or no 90-degree corners. And then we had the egg Caprices and,
a whale.
And and we thought everything was going to look alike. Now that we're to AI car design, I'm sorry, Harley Earl, but I don't know. we need you back. We need to get some styling and such. I was just telling Dave, I was just reading the articles on the new Volkswagen Scout, which, if those that don't remember, Volkswagen bought the rights to the International Scout, and they're coming out with a retro vehicle, and it looks like a Jeep Grand Cherokee. Doesn't look like a Scout. Number one, they have to be four-door. Everything has to be four-door. It has that little uptick that the Scout did for the rear quarter window, but it is four-door. So the first thing I thought is, boy, that's Jeep, not Grand Cherokee, Grand Wagoneer. It looks like the Jeep Grand Wagoneer. The new one, not the old one, because the Jeep Grand Wagoneer, which is supposed to be retro to the Jeep Grand Wagoneer, doesn't look a damn thing like the original Jeep Grand Wagoneer.
Although it has some retro styling cues, just nothing that harken back to the original Grand Wagoneer.
Yeah, it's got retro styling cues to something.
Gives me 60s Lincoln vibes a little bit.
Yeah, that definitely does that. And when I'm looking through these photos of, well, the Scout is the SUV and the Terra is the pickup truck version, and they're saying solid axles and bench seats and hybrid options, so they're not going to be completely EV lineup. Okay, but the Scout badge, maybe. The taillight treatment looks like, to me, a Challenger, kind of a modern Challenger. Again, let's let people start designing cars again. There's a human factor there. It's like this myth of the self-driving car. Cars can't drive, it's part of that book in the podcaster I was listening to today talking about the book is we've taught it. Self-driving has been teased to us since the 30s according to him, I haven't read the book, and this is the book I want to get, vacuum tubes. We've got vacuum tubes. Now we can do this with the car. Oh, we have transistors. Now we can do this. And we have magnets, and we can put magnets in the road, and they can drive themselves. And, when you're on this interstate, everybody will hook up just like a train, and, whatever. It's, and it really didn't make sense to me until listening to his whole description. And of course, it was from his point of view. That's why I want to read the book. Every 30 years, just when we begin to forget it, that how bad it didn't work, they tease us with it again. And we're in that world right now. Self-driving doesn't work. I mean, at this point, we have versions of it. And going in a straight line on a well-painted highway, et cetera, like Blue Cruise or whatever Chevy's is called. Yes, with radar and cameras and that, and LiDAR and such. My robot vacuum has LiDAR and cameras. Tesla just relies on cameras. I would expect at least the technology in my robot vacuum to be in my Tesla.
I am not a fan of the electronic nannies, but they do seem to work, especially the radar based ones. I'm still sitting over here thinking about Chrysler Retro in the 90s and the early 2000s, and what I thought they did well that again didn't reference anything was, do you remember the Chrysler Crossfire and the original Pacifica? Both had that heavy sort of skyscraper deco styling, but it was straight out of like Batman the Animated Series. It didn't look like any vintage vehicle at all, whether it was Chrysler or somebody else.
I always thought the Crossfire was the best Mercedes SLK you could buy.
It was definitely the best looking.
It was half the price, and I thought the styling was definitely better than, especially that first generation 230 SLK. I love the creases in the hood or the indentations. I mean, it had a lot of Art Deco styling, but it wasn't hearkening back to a previous vehicle. We knew
Right.
that, the reason we do retro vehicles is the same reason we can't make a new damn movie or TV show anymore, is because we know this worked. People are going to buy it. We can't afford to spend $1 billion developing a new car that's going to flop. So we go retro with the design, and it just, we go retro with the design, go with the hypercars. It's just, we want to have, it's all about price tags. It doesn't matter what it looks like in exclusivity. But we need to wish I said something earlier about corporate America and, Lee Iacocca and his $20 million a year. That's the world we've come to, is we can't take risks because our shareholders get upset,
Well, and we don't exist in a world where people are looking for the long-term health of any company. They're looking for the next quarter where their bonus is calculated and how many quarters they have to look good in, and then their golden parachute gets them on the way out. I mean, when Walter Chrysler put his name on Maxwell, he was there for the long haul, right? He's like, I want this company to look good. And interestingly, Walter Chrysler made history in the 1920s because he was the first auto exec to be paid $1 million a year. And that was to run Buick before he got his hands on Maxwell. And that's what they had to pay him to put up with Billy Durant, because he and Billy Durant had very different personalities. But anyway, so Chrysler eventually went and bought Maxwell and put his own stamp on it. But, Walter Chrysler or the Dodge brothers or Henry Ford or any of those guys, they were like, my name is on this product. It's gonna look good and work good and represent me well forever. And now nobody's name is on the door. I mean, it's, name some corporate executives that aren't Lee Iacocca or Elon Musk. Like, we don't know who they are, and they don't have the same vested stake, especially in a mature business like the auto industry. Like,
you're very correct in that. And the guy that stands out right now, I could not tell you who runs General Motors in that, but we have we talked Tommy Boy earlier with what's the actor in there? I'm all of a sudden forgetting his name.
Chris Farley or David
Chris
Spade.
Farley. No, Chris Farley. I wanted to say John Candy, but Chris Farley. Well,
same guy, different generation.
Yeah. Chris Farley's cousin runs Ford, and he's very.
Jim Farley is Chris Farley's cousin.
Yes, they're look at him. They look very similar, but Jim Farley's out there. He vintage races, and he truly vintage races, and he gets out there with the people, and he stands up. That's why we have this new, $250,000 Mustang GT3 or GT. What's it called? Disapproving cat. I'm sure you can give me the answer, but GTP or whatever the new Mustang is.
I was there at the unveiling, and I don't remember the name.
It's there because he wanted a Ford that he could go race and beat the Porsche GT3s. So he's the guy that sticks out in my head. The other guy that sticks out is, he doesn't stick out that great, is a Marconi or whoever runs Fiat right now, the Fiat Stellantis.
The Spanish fellow, yeah, the one who said that they sink or swim on their own and was kind of all cutthroat about it.
You got 10 years to prove your way, and then 24 months later, sorry, you're gone. And as Derek and Dave were chatting, and I was driving, so I couldn't. Stellantis put their proving grounds up for sale because I think was it you, Dave, that kind of said, well, they just don't have anything that needs proving grounds anymore.
It needs to test it. I think that was actually Derek's line, but yeah, it was. We got to run the Pacifica flat out for 24 hours in the heat. Yeah. Well, and so much of the auto industry as a whole is just the story of like integration and then spinning everything off and then integrate. I mean, hospitals are sort of the same way, but that's off topic. But it's like, I have to own everything from the rubber plantation in South America to the tire factory that's going to equip my cars. Like, and then you've got, I'm just going to contract with everybody like GM in the 80s and beat everybody down on price. And we don't care if you go out of business as long as we get our parts. But then, of course, that proves to be an unreliable source, and so you want to bring it in-house again. And so it seems like Chrysler's in that downward spin where, they're either going to contract out for that stuff or they're going to use one of their corporate partners' facilities when they need it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be trying to be. It's a very hot topic in the cigar industry, and was vertically integrated. And that, that's what Henry Ford always wanted to be, is vertically integrated, is everything from, making the tires to growing the rubber trees, etc., to, dictating this and that about what came in for his Model Ts. Everything was controlled by Ford. And, we have anti-monopoly laws and stuff that help prevent some of that now. And I heard
those are usually aimed at horizontal integration more than vertical. Yeah. I mean, we don't care if you own your suppliers; you just can't own your competitors.
They, I swear it was Rivian. I heard something about this week that's having, in addition to some safety concerns that popped up with them this week, they're having trouble with their suppliers that they, being in Normal, Illinois, which I don't ever remember Diamond Star Motors having issues with their suppliers being in the exact same building, exact same place in Normal, Illinois. They're having a little bit of trouble with suppliers and getting things. But that also will go back to the styling trends. I think as much as we might hate EVs and things like that, one of the cool things that's come about because of this EV revolution, and you might hate Elon Musk, but one thing that's cool about him and what he's done is now all of a sudden we have all these new car companies. Before Tesla, what is the last ground up start car company can you think of other than DeLorean?
Kaiser. And even then, Kaiser was built on the remains of Graham Page. So, show me a from scratch company, right?
Yeah, I mean, you had Bricklin for a few weeks there in 75 and 76. You had,
the impact of Bricklin on the mind of the automotive historian is awe-inspiring. Because, like, when I was a kid in the 80s, people were like, "Oh, Bricklin, Malcolm Bricklin." I'm like, weird, ugly wedge car, don't care. In the 90s, people were like, "Oh, Malcolm Bricklin. Ugly wedge car, don't care." I still don't know what the Bricklin deal was. Like, it was supposed to be a safe sports car, which I guess
well Malcolm
is the same
Bricklin,
thing that DeLorean was supposed to be. But like, it just, I don't understand.
You got to go Malcolm Bricklin. He's the guy that brought Subaru to America.
Okay. I do drive a Corvair because it's kind of Subaru-like with the Boxer, and I figured it'd help me fit in here in Vermont,
brought in the original Subaru 360s in that and imported them. He was kind of like, is it Dennis Hoffman? No, it's
Max Hoffman, the Porsche
Max
importer.
Hoffman. Well, Porsche, Volkswagen, MG, all of that. He's kind of, I think Malcolm Bricklin was a 70s iteration of that. I mean, he brought in a whole bunch of Subaru 360s and tried to sell them. He wasn't completely successful because there's a little company in the town I'm from called UFS, Unclaimed Freight Services, that kind of got their start wholesaling off the Subaru 360s that
he didn't sell.
Malcolm Bricklin couldn't sell. And then he went on to his own car company, and I can't remember what he did after Bricklin, but he also was involved with another car company. GTD, that's the Mustang. It just popped into my head. Sorry.
That's usually a 4 a.m. thought. Cold sweat.
Exactly.
GTD. I got to text Dave and Derek. Yeah.
Now, so it's, that's one thing I think that Musk did, is all of a sudden we have Tesla, and of course then we had Fisker, then we had Fisker again, and we probably will have Fisker again. But
isn't that a brand of scissors? Like, that's the thing that gets me. Is like, I get there's a car company, and there's this, I guess one is Fiskars and the other one is Fisker.
Well, it might be Fiskars and Fiskars, but I think the trademark office would go, you're not going to confuse really sharp, good scissors with a car.
I mean, I don't know. Volvo makes big trucks and marine motors, and I'm prepared to believe there's some big industrial conglomerate that makes electric trucks and scissors and probably something I'm not, probably like slag pumps or something that I'm not.
I used to have a pair of electric scissors, which could be a way that Fisker could fund his new company, is starting to sell scissors.
That sounds like a good way to lose a finger.
Working at Rivian's supposed to be. Sorry, I better not say that.
Oh,
it came out of one of the reports this week.
But no, it is. It's very very cool to live in a time where there are automotive startups, and it makes you realize what a difficult business it is to make inroads in. And it's not just setting up a plant and having a cool product; it's getting people to sell it, getting people comfortable that they can have it serviced. I mean, that's probably the number one complaint I hear about Teslas, is that their service model is really hard to deal with. Like, if you have any kind of problem getting service on a timely basis and knowing that it'll be done properly, and that kills. I mean, that killed Studebaker, for Pete's sake. Like, if people don't trust that they can get your product fixed, they're not going to be comfortable driving it across the country. And in which case, what good is it?
Well, I'm gonna defend Tesla a little bit in that, and that, yeah, sometimes it's difficult to get a Tesla fixed, and problems. One of the businesses I consulted with, work closely with Tesla, and Tesla will do just random changes. So a door might not. Yeah.
What's your VIN number? Yeah.
Well, it might not even be that. They might get a stack of 15 doors that are exactly this way, so they build the car around that door, and then the next door's order's a little bit different.
Henry Leland is rolling in his grave right now. Oh my God. Okay, do tell. That's interesting.
But the Tesla does have service issues. But guess what? Take your Ford in for transmission work. Take your GM in for engine work or whatever. You're going to have a month or two. It's not uncommon for a dealership to say, it's going to be 60, it's going to be 40 days before we can get to it, or make it, you schedule. When I was having the transmission issues with my Fiesta, one dealership was 9.5 weeks out before they would even let me bring the car to the lot for them to, I scheduled the appointment to bring the car to them. And then they would basically get to it sometime between that 9.5 weeks and 15 weeks. And then we would order parts. I ended up taking it back to the dealer I bought it from and just left it. And 2 weeks later, it was done. But even they were telling me, well, yeah, even they were telling me 4 to 6 weeks before they could even look at it. And that's, you don't hear about that as much with Ford and that, but you definitely hear about it with Tesla, because they make all kinds of noise. Now, on the flip side, I hear the Rivian service model, which is very similar to Tesla's, and I believe you even saw one of their service trucks on the road. I don't hear, and I think I probably know more Rivian owners than I do Tesla owners at this point in time. They don't complain about it. They love the service. They love everything that can be done and how prompt it is and how quick it is. So it's a matter of, it's like,
not the model, it's the execution.
Yeah. It's the, I would say it's
the type of person who buys a Rivian versus the type of person who buys a Tesla.
It's a customer service model, similar to Amazon and Walmart. Amazon has some of the best customer service on the planet. Walmart might give a damn if you can breathe. It's funny because my day job puts me in a lot of Walmarts and a lot of customer service, and how discombobulated their system is, and things from Walmart.com may or may not be able to be returned to the store and things like that. Amazon, I have never contacted Amazon customer service and not had the decision go my way, even to the point of them matching prices. I've gotten them to match sale prices, but it's just, you've got to figure out, you got that where this all started. You've got to have that customer service model in place to make your end user happy, because if you screw me on service, I'm never going to go back and buy from you. It's one reason I probably don't buy from Temu or Alabita or whatever those Chinese companies are that are all over your social media feeds and everybody wants you to buy, just because I can buy a 3,000 piece socket wrench set for $29.95. Even if it's Snap-on quality, if I have a problem, I want service.
Getting the consumer to make that determination up front is always a challenge, though. I mean, once you've been burned, it's easy to decide that. But how many companies make that initial hurdle in order to persuade people that they've got the reliable, or that it's worth having a reliable company backing up the product? Because a lot of people, I mean, they just shop on price alone, and I mean that's kind of why Walmart dominates in our communities, is because there used to be better service available, but people decided that they wanted to save 11 cents on every item or whatever.
Yeah, I remember the good old days of Walmart. Sammy, good old Sammy boy.
When did Sam Walton die? Because I'm not sure I ever set foot in a Walmart prior to that point.
Well, I couldn't tell you if I ever did that, but even some of him lasted a few weeks after he passed away.
I have very fond memories of Kmart.
92, 93.
Oh, but yeah, we definitely did not have any Walmarts in my town then.
I know we had one or two where I was from, but and it was always, he was really big on American made. Maybe not necessarily made in America, but American made, and that's one of the things I remember out of him. And of course, we don't care about that anymore. I had the conversation the other day with somebody, and we've had the episodes about it before your time, Dave. Maybe we can revisit it. What's an American car? Is it made in America? Is it where the money goes in the end? And I have my beliefs on it. You have your beliefs on it. The next guy has slightly different beliefs on it or understandings of it. I'm usually on the losing end because people don't like mine. But going back to the styling, we've talked customer service. We've talked. We keep straying a little bit, but it's so easy to do because there's so many of these other variables that come into why all the cars are the same. And where I was going with the electric cars is now we're getting these smaller companies that are now producing different designs and trying to make it. And sometimes they're reaching too far for the stars. They're trying to grow too fast. But, Tesla, Fisker, Rivian, Lucid, there's another one that just went away. And then you had Rimac. And then we can talk about one of the good things about everybody having more money than they know what to do with, or everybody other than the people I know having more money than they know what to do with.
Somebody's got it.
Is we've got, Pagani, we've got Bugatti, we've got, this super custom order Lamborghinis and super custom Ferraris and Porsche special wishes and Koenigsegg and I can't even, all of these $1 million cars. I mean, I saw Instagram or something, and I don't quite believe it, but it goes, even the LaFerrari owner feels poor, and he's pulling out, and there's a Bugatti, and there's a Koenigsegg, and well, I mean, they're all $4 million cars. The LaFerrari set a new record with Sammy Hagar's sale a week or two ago. But it's, as bad as the styling is, it's a good time because we've got a lot of different people doing the styling and the different looks. There are a lot of companies trying different things, but again, they all go back to it's all designed in CAD, it's all designed by AI, and it all looks the same. I mean, a Lucid's a gorgeous car, but it's just a Tesla with a couple different colors and a couple different slight angles.
One neat thing about the change in technology is that at least the electric cars allow for some different styling. I mean, like, you aren't required to have that big front cooling grill anymore, for example. Although the downside, I suppose, is a lot of them tend to be very thick around the middle because they've got to accommodate those batteries and they want to put them at kind of a low center of gravity. But the Rivians are really interesting because they combine a fairly conventional look with like just enough to let you know that, oh, that's not just a normal car. That's a Rivian with the crazy headlights, for example. And I think that's always an effective shtick. And that's sort of like when the Prius came out, like a big part of it being a Prius was that it looked like a hybrid. Like there were hybrid versions of normal cars, but people didn't buy them as much because buying a Prius was a statement. So I suppose that enters in, well, it has to. I mean, a distinctively styled car is a statement, because if you wanted to blend in, you just buy the Camry and be done with it.
Well, the Prius made a statement, and it definitely in its second generation was a bold statement. And it was hard to get because at the time, my supervisor's father was very, very, very high up in Roger Penske's NASCAR organization, i.e. he ran the team. And he had to pull strings even with Roger Penske to get his other daughter a new Prius because they were so far back ordered. But that's the only way that girl got her Prius when it was new. And I think Prius tried to do the same thing with the newest Prius design because it's very out there. And as much as it is the same as everything else out there, it is also very unique.
I like it.
Every time I see it, I forget it's a Prius for a minute or two. And I've seen a couple with just slight modifications, and I would not own one, if that makes sense. I mean, I like them. They're a interesting car. I'd own it before a Tesla. But that's also another thing I was going to say, even before you brought up Prius, is I'm not a big fan of the new Toyota styling, but it's bold. Very edgy, very sharp angled. A new Toyota is a new Toyota. Nissan, I think, Nissan went the other way. And if you look at a new Pathfinder, it looks a lot like the Rivian. They're kind of, well, we're not electric, but we're going to make us look electric. I mean, there's some definite statements from some of these manufacturers, whether we're going to try to cheat our way through or whether we're going to be bold and emblazoned. And as you know, I think Toyota's doing for we're going to say gasoline side of things, the internal combustion engine cars. I think they're for normal people who have $50,000 for a car. They're some of the more aggressive styling out there.
It's hilarious to hear you say that there are now gas cars aping electric car styling, because 100 years ago, that was the sign your electric car maker was about to go out of business, was because suddenly they were starting to make a fake gas car. You're like, yeah, it's got a radiator and a hood. Don't mind the fact that there's just a motor under the seats.
What was that? Somebody sent me a statistic the other day. Let me find that. Where you're talking about the past there.
I'm always talking about the past. It's
comfortable. Well, the past.
I know
you could be talking about. You're talking about the present, and since the past repeats itself, you could be talking about the past.
Well, I mean, and arguably that's why we study history, is because it informs our going forward, because we see patterns and we know that people really don't change a tremendous amount over the centuries. The world changes, but the people sort of stay the same within it.
Now, actually, my father sent me this little quip on Facebook. In 1900, 40% of the cars in America were powered by steam, 38% by electricity, and 22% by gasoline.
Because there were no self-starters yet. There were, however, self-driving vehicles, because the horse would walk you home from the bar if you fell asleep.
Or you hoped it did.
Or you'd wake up in its favorite field while it grazed. That's possible too. But the good news is you didn't fly into anybody or any deer at 80 miles an hour and turn them into red mist.
You did notice? Yeah, disapproving cat also agreed that it was mist is what would happen when you get a deer at 250 miles an hour.
But the Super
I've got,
Cruise
I've,
performance-
I've got a story about that, but it's probably not one that I should repeat, especially in a very public forum.
Mm.
I
I like venison, but I don't like it tenderized to that degree.
Well, you could drink it through a straw.
Oh, deer shake. You know, I actually had a deer encounter 2 nights ago in a suburban neighborhood. I just happened to flip on my high beams for a moment. Saw this big, like 8-point buck staring at me from the side yard. And this time of year, they're all like hormoned up. So it wanted to fight me. It was like chuffing and lowering its head. I'm like, listen, I'm in an F-250. I'll win this fight, but I don't want to go through the body work. So 'tis the season. Keep it safe out there.
I've never hit a deer. I've run over a dead deer. I've been hit by a deer twice. Well, I've been hit by a whole deer once, and I've been hit by a portion of a deer twice. And it was because of a guy in an F-150 hit one and it went into pieces, and the other piece came and got me.
Wow.
As it came apart around the F-150. See, and I can't tell you the other story, people.
and that's the low impact story. No pun intended.
So did we cover, I think we covered some styling trends, but in typical No Driving Gloves fashion, we covered a lot of other aspects around it. You never know. Disapproving cat. Ew.
My final thought on the matter is that the consumer drives the styling trends, and what the consumer wants now is what you're seeing, or they'll find out to their hazard. But I think that
I don't think the consumer drives styling trends. It goes back to, and we'll have an episode again on car colors. Consumers want something different, and they have to settle for what's available to them.
Oh, that's a good thought to end on. We need to revisit that. All right. Well, I'll say my part, and I don't know all the good business about if you liked this, you should subscribe. But if you did like this, you should subscribe and you should tell your friends. And until I talk to you next time, keep your motor running.
That'll do it for this evening, or this afternoon, or this morning, whenever you're listening to this.
Whenever you listen.
Happy generic time of the day. Bye, everybody.